Okay. Alrighty, so let's get started. Today we'll be talking about effective game design under pressure because I know all of you will be, or I hope all of you will be participating in our game jam next week. And these are some great tips to effectively create a game that will actually hit the spot for players. And first, a little bit about me. Let me hide the Zoom bar. Hide meeting controls. Okay. First, a bit about me. My name is Tony Meng. I studied computer science and design at UC San Diego. So I am local to Southern California. I graduated this year, class of 2024. Woohoo. And I've taught two courses, almost three now, with over 400 students at my university. And I've worked with a lot of startups and small businesses, so definitely had a lot of experience in this space. And on Roblox, my name is Hypen and my username is HiPenguinFlip. I primarily specialize in project management, UI UX, and software engineering. I've had 11 years on Roblox, so almost over a decade. Wow. That's like almost half of my entire life. Um, and I previously interned at Roblox as an accelerator and also was in their event organizer program. And I've also going to RDC almost every year. And these are my two biggest projects that I'm working on right now. First one is Bloxtopia. It's a big city builder game with a lot of huge lore behind it, and it's multiplayer and super cool stuff. And also Ragdoll Simulator 2, which has about close to 25 million. But yeah, that's enough about me. Let's talk about today's topic, which is game design. And first, we'll start by talking about design. Design, in its most broadest sense, it's about solving a problem. Um, and in the Roblox sense, you have these players that need a game to that need to scratch their itch for a particular game. And we're using game design to solve that, to scratch that itch. So game design is about creating a game to meet a specific gameplay need. So maybe some people need a really fun roleplay game where they can like design their house and um, invite their friends to like roleplay and pretend they're visiting some huge city or town. And we're using game design to make a game that scratches that specific itch. And um, in this case, we're targeting a particular player base, and we want to make sure that we define that really clearly when we're designing a game. Who exactly is it that we're designing for? And we've already covered the basics on Wednesday, I believe, with Gibfoot from, was it Super Social? Um, right. On Wednesday, we talked about game design on Roblox. If you didn't attend that one, we covered some topics, very basic, high level, like what is game design, what are core loops, um, linear player progression, and intro to fast prototyping. Show of hands, I don't know if Discord allows show of hands. Um, how many people have attended the Wednesday workshop? Maybe you can, is there a raise hand option? Okay. Oh, okay. One person raise their hand. Okay, that's okay. Some people haven't
People are
attended.
raising their hands, but you might not be able to see it because it's a request to speak function. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so a couple people did raise their hands, but it just comes up as them wanting to speak. But yeah, I remember quite a few people from this group going to the
Okay,
original one.
cool. Some of us haven't, so I'll briefly talk about them. Core loops is where you have three core elements surrounding like the center, really what the gameplay is in a game. And you'll have three very core gameplay actions. So for an RPG, it would be something like explore, fight, and upgrade, where you explore this like barren wasteland or something like that, and then you fight these monsters, and then you upgrade your gear so that you can explore more and fight more. And linear player progression is about setting up some sort of progression loop in your game. And most commonly on Roblox, we see this through kind of money, like cost of equipment, or like leveling, like you collect experience or you get skills, that sort of thing. And I believe we covered a little bit of intro to fast prototyping as well. And we'll develop that more today. But today we want to focus on how do we actually do effective game design in practice, right? Because um, we're going to run into a lot of problems when we actually go into game design. So what are some problems that you might anticipate? And you can answer this in the chat. I'll take a look at the chat. So the question is, what kind of problems do you anticipate when designing a game, when developing a game? What kinds of things do you run into? Bugs, of course. Many, many bugs. Very rarely that will just have a game coded and it just works properly the first time. Having an idea and making it too big or over scope for Roblox. Very true. Now, I don't know about like specifically for Roblox. I know Roblox has some very cool games. Um, but of course, when we're starting off, we want to keep things straightforward. What are some problems we might anticipate? Not being able to pick an idea. Those are all great ones. And I have some listed on this next slide. What are some problems you see on this slide? It's kind of a hint. What are some problems you see on this slide? Money you can spend on the game. Okay, let's see. Bugs, of course. Now, if you notice this little code block is in the corner on purpose. It's kind of hard to see. Time constraints, yes. Trying to make it original, yes. Okay, so let's look at all of these, right? So we have time. Time is obviously going to be a constraint. Cost, right? Time and cost are going to be pretty interrelated. You may not have the money to fund game development. We have team and talent. So that's making sure you have a dedicated team to work on your game. And maybe if you like have different visions for that game, like that can clash as well. Settling on a good idea. Um, you have to come up with lots of ideas. And how do you know which ideas are actually going to end up working? So that's also a topic you want to consider as well. And other games, right? So there's going to be other competitions, so to speak. How are you going to put your game out there and make sure it does well despite these other games that are already out there? And audience demand, right? What do the players want? What kind of things should you be creating that people actually want to play? And this code block is in the corner on purpose because I'm going to call it scope creep. Like, of course, you're going to have bugs in your game, but there's this thing called scope creep, which is when you have this super cool idea for a game and you want to put all these different features in because, like, okay, you look at these other games and you realize that like in order to beat the current competition, like you have to have something new for yourself, right? Okay, maybe you look at Jailbreak and they have Jailbreak has a feature where you can rob banks, right? And then Mad City has a feature where you can kind of collect items while you're in prison and like do some crafting, and then you can craft like tools to actually break out of prison. Now, let's say your idea is to combine both of these elements into the same game, right? So that you have both elements so that more people play your game. And the problem with that is you're going to create a lot of scope creep where you have this huge idea, but like you don't have the team resources to actually build it out. And also, the whole argument of trying to combine all features into a single game, this is not a very good competitive advantage for creating a game. Like this is going to cost you an immense amount of resources to create something that doesn't even have that good of a leading edge. Um, so you should find some other unique leading edge. Hi, there's someone behind me. Um, let's see. Yeah, so um, combining all the features into a single game, I believe this is called the catch-all solution, and this is not what you should be aiming towards. So with all of these problems, it can be really intimidating to build a successful game. But today we're going to be talking about ways to mitigate or reduce these problems. And what if I told you that there's one method to address all of these problems? Would you believe me? So this one method is called rapid prototyping. Anyway, what is rapid prototyping? So let's go over it briefly. It's this four-step flow from that goes from ideate, prototype, test, and iterate. So let's go through each of these steps, starting with ideate. Ideate is where you define the problem and brainstorm many solutions. So you might do some research and you'll do a lot of whiteboarding, brainstorming, coming up with as many ideas as you can. And next step is to prototype. So this is where you quickly build low fidelity. Lo-fi stands for low fidelity, like kind of like low quality, like early stage. That's what you should think about. So lo-fi prototypes for different ideas and variations of your game. And step three is to test. You want to test with the target audience, so like real players, and get feedback that'll actually get you to pick the best ideas. And the fourth step is to iterate. So refine and pivot your ideas based on the findings. And you want to converge on the best ideas and kind of filter out to what's actually going to work. And if you look at this little diagram, you'll notice that it's a cycle. And going from idea to prototype to test, it kind of decreases in size. And that's on purpose, right? You want to start really big and gradually narrow down your ideas. And as you keep doing this, you'll keep creating much more ideas and keep narrowing down. And that's the kind of flow that you want. We don't always have the luxury of time and resources, especially during game jam. So this cycle is the best way to minimize your use of time and resources because you're going through ideas really quickly and testing them out to see if they actually work so that you spend time not on developing the whole game from start to finish, but creating these minimum prototypes that will actually test your ideas and get you closer to where you want to go. And so the target timeline for how often you should use the cycle is about every month. You should be on the test, you should test at least once every month on at least 3 different users. 3 is a good number for getting different perspectives. And when you go above 3, that's when you start getting repetitive comments. So 3 is a pretty good sweet spot. And you should try to condense this, obviously, for your game jam. You may not have that much time for each of these individual stages, but you still want to make sure you include all of these because it's very important to make sure that you actually finish on time. Now, this 4-step model is actually based on the double diamond design model. That's what it's called. You can Google it later on your own time. And this is used as industry standards in top companies and game studios. So you start small, you start at what you think the problem might be, right? And you'll do your research and you expand, right? You look at all of these different games out there and you kind of narrow down what the idea you want to develop is, right? What is the actual market need out there? And now you're converging at the center, and this is where you start to define the need that you want to address, and then you expand as you brainstorm more ideas. So that's where you come up with potential solutions. And then you'll, as you build and test, you'll converge on the target game that you want to build. So this is the double diamond design model. I know Google uses the triple diamond design model, but this is pretty good for all of our intents and purposes. And so why exactly do we want to use rapid prototyping? You want to really understand the problem space, right? What games are currently out there? And most importantly, you want to save time and resources by limiting the project scope to these low fidelity prototypes. You want to spend the least amount of code, like spend the least amount of time building your game so that you can actually answer questions, right? Is my game going to work? And because you're testing it on real players, you're going to get real insights, right? When you test it on these real people are going to give feedback. And lastly, as you keep testing, you'll gather early interest and feedback. And that'll tell you what works and what doesn't, right? So when you post on social media, like when you go on Discord, Twitter, or X, to post your game, then you gather some interest and people are interested in testing out your game. So this is the best way to build that early feedback. So how does this work in practice? How do we actually do this in practice? And I'll show you some examples as well. So here's how to prototype, test, and iterate quickly. So using this four-step model, we'll start on the first step. So that's ideate. And on the ideate step, we want to get the lay of the land first, right? So we want to understand what games are currently out there. We'll do a search on the Discover page, what's doing well, what's not, right? What kind of opportunities does that give us for game ideas? Brainstorm many, many wild ideas. And a model that you might have heard of in your other classes might be the SWOT model, the SWOT analysis. Um, I don't think I can zoom in, but essentially it's SWOT. S stands for strengths. So um, what what does our team do really well, right? What ideas do we have? Weaknesses are what do we not really do well right now? Where could we improve? Opportunities are what's currently out there and what can we build that like fills a gap that's not filled yet. So this is where you see like wild ideas that haven't been built um, very often. And threats are big games that are already doing well out there, and they might threaten your game idea. So this is the SWOT model, the SWOT analysis model that you can use for understanding what's currently out there and what opportunities you can bring on. So when you're in this initial stage, you want to do some research, right? So that might include looking on forums, looking on game reviews, what's currently out there, and looking at all of the different games out there right now. And in the bottom right corner, these are past games that did really well, but they current like they did really well in the past, but current like in recent times they have fallen off. So you want to understand why these games did well and why they fell off, right? And this will tell you about what opportunities there are currently. So when we look at Town of Robloxia, okay, it's a town and city game, and um, that presents an opportunity to build games that play off of the town roleplay model. So then you get games like Bloxburg, Brookhaven, Welcome to the Town of Robloxia. Oh, I guess the new one, the neighborhood of Robloxia. And um, in the middle, we have Adopt and Raise a Baby. And this is where we get games like Adopt Me, a lot of these roleplay games. And we also have Warrior Cats. And this is like you come in with a unique avatar and like a unique lore, and you kind of role play in this unique environment. And so let's look at prototype. So this is the second stage. For prototype, we want to keep our prototype simple and low quality. And sometimes that even means working on paper, not even in Roblox Studio. You might be on the whiteboard drawing out, okay, what are the levels going to look like? And then even though like this is kind of an internal tool to understand what's out there, you can actually test this with players. Like you show them your drawings and be like, um, okay, if you were to play this kind of game, is it fun, even in paper form? And you can even see this person is keeping track of score using this paper notebook, and they're keeping track of players using these little markers, like probably like an eraser or something. And you can actually test it like that. It's very quick to build these prototypes, which makes them so good. Um, Here's another example of a board game, and they have post-its that keep track of like objectives, game objectives, right? So this is very quick way to build out a game idea without actually spending time in studio, like collecting, like building 3D models, stuff like that. So this is paper prototyping. And this is also called Wizard of Oz prototyping. When I say Wizard of Oz, that means you have this person that's like the game master. So like if you think about Hunger Games, there's this one person behind the scenes that's like controlling all the different game pieces. And that's what you can think about. There's this one game master that's controlling the game, even though it's not actually coded, like it's not a fully scripted game. So these are the kind of quick prototyping strategies. And also, you can, when you're in your later stages, you can leverage the advantages of Roblox's engine. Um, Roblox gives you a lot of engine tools out of the box, where other platforms don't necessarily do that. Some examples are multiplayer and server infrastructure. So you can make matchmaking really easily on Roblox that you can't do easily elsewhere. You also get player-to-player interactions. So that's things like chat, um, um, people like physically interacting, and like for example in like two-player obbies, um, things like that. Roblox makes it really easy to prototype that, to have two people playing the same game. Um, Second thing is physics engine. Roblox gives you the physics engine right out of the box. So you can prototype like huge maps
It's
or like,
2:30.
oops, huge maps and obstacle courses. Um, so like very quickly, and you don't need a whole lot of code for that. And that's really easy to prototype. In Roblox Studio, you also get creation tools and prefabs. So those are things like free models and plugins and essentially toolkits that are part of Roblox Studio that you don't necessarily need to build from scratch. And that lets you create a game really quickly without spending that much time on the individual assets. So let's look at some examples. How many of you recognize these games? And you can just type this into chat. You can type these if you recognize them. I'll take a look. Skyblocks. Yeah, we see Skyblocks right here. This is very early stages. How about any other games you guys see? Meep City? Yeah, I get some water. What do you notice about these prototypes? What are some things you notice? Yeah, adopt me. This is adopt me. This middle one is vehicle simulator. I don't expect you guys to know this bottom right one, but it's one of my personal favorites. Cat shipyards. Yeah. What are some things you notice about these prototypes? In fact, you can even read here. It says this game is a work in progress. Not everything is done. So this is like very early stage. I think like 2016 or 2017 Meep City. These are all very early stage. What are some things you notice? Okay, 3D visuals are very early stage. Yeah. You don't get a whole lot of like complicated assets. These buildings are kind of blocky, very blocky, not much fancy assets. This is like a spaceship game. Spaceships are very blocky. Planets are just spheres. Yeah, they have all their rudimentary building blocks to make the game work. That's right. Um, if you let's start with the top left example. This is Skyblock. Skyblock was built in, it was actually sold to EasyGG, and it was a very basic prototype, right? And they wanted to make it into like a kind of working game. And they spent only 2 weeks revamping this prototype and releasing it. And when they released this, it went to the front page and people wanted more, right? Even though it was very bare bones in just 2 weeks, right? Players wanted more. And even people from Minecraft were like, hey, these Roblox people are stealing our idea. And even though it's its own like game, it's very rudimentary and it started very simple, but as they got more interest and feedback, players said, okay, we want to be able to fight, to be able to visit other people's islands. Then they started adding more features. To They iterated based on testing with real players, right? Very quickly, very quick prototyping, very quick release. In this one, this is Vehicle Simulator. It was built in Roblox's Accelerator program. Accelerator program is a 12-week program where they build a game idea very quickly and release it and test it out. And this one was very popular, and eventually they added in much more features and cars. And of course, it started out as just like a car game with like kind of realistic destruction and racing. So that's kind of its selling point. When we look at Adopt Me, this was also an accelerator game. It was built back in 2017, I believe. And how many people remember it being like actually about like adopting a baby and raising it and keeping its needs up? There were no pets back then. Does anyone remember that? Just curious. Does anyone remember old Adopt Me? Did you even know about Adopt Me? You just played the obbies back then. Heard about it, but haven't played it. That's okay. This was back like, I guess 7 years ago now. Yeah, when it first started, it was just about raising kids. And that was the whole selling point. And then you would build a house and do very basic customization. And they built this over the course of 12 weeks. Um, and when they actually put it out into the wild, it was popular. But they didn't actually hit their turning point when they added pets, and pets became the new thing. And they, of course, they didn't know that until they actually tested it. And now their whole focus pivoted to just pets, to focusing on like raising a pet instead of raising a baby. And they also took out this stats menu and changed it to a whole new, more social system. And those insights they wouldn't have gotten just by working in the office, right? They only would have known by actually testing their prototype. Um, Looking at Meep City, buildings are very rudimentary. When Alex Neutron first opened this game, it was very bare bones. The doors were just bricks, right? Like it was very basic, but it was fun and people were interested. When he released it, the game was capped to about 200 players or something. And if you wanted to play beyond 200 players, you had to wait in the lobby until someone left and there would be an opening. And the only way around that was to pay for VIP, which would get you in and skip the waiting line. So that was really popular. And he saw that opportunity to bring that social experience to Roblox. So that's what he did. Keth Shipyards is a very bare bones space game, but it gets just the basic flight mechanics down. But over time, this blossomed over to a super cool space game, and we'll see that later as well. When you do a lot of prototyping, you're gonna end up with hits, and you're also gonna end up with very basic games, like for example, just like nondescript dungeon game, but they're just bare bones prototypes, and that's okay. It's all about prototyping is all about answering questions, about seeing if ideas will work. And when they do work, then you develop them more. Anyone recognize this bottom row of games? Anyone recognize or have an idea of who might have made these games? Anyone? Let's see. Yes. Okay, someone got it. These games were made by Defaultio. Does anyone know what game Defaultio made that was his claim to fame? Lumber Tycoon, yes, he made Lumber Tycoon 1 and 2. But even between those games, he had a bunch of prototypes that either never took off or they were popular but didn't hit the spot. So you'll see this helicopters game, which was only made for gamepad. This cone game, which is kind of underrated, to be honest, despite its like ratio. It's like a story game. But when you actually put it out, you'll see what works and what doesn't. Space game, very basic prototype of like a multiplayer space game. And this physics sandbox where you could make vehicles. So these absurd collection of random games that you're just trying out, and they don't necessarily have to work. You're just trying to answer a question of, would this be cool to build out more? Let's talk about testing. Testing is the third stage. And when we're in the testing stage, we want to gather early evangelists from the community. And when I say early evangelists, these are people who are interested in consistently following the game's development. So they might stay in your Discord server, giving early feedback and spreading the word. Keep in mind, these are things that they would do by themselves just from being interested in your game. And this is wild because this is really helpful to you when you're in your early stage of developing your game. Otherwise, there's other ways to get people and feedback on your games, and that's from other developers, from other players, and QA communities. And we'll see an example of a QA community. Um, let's see here on, I believe, the next slide. Um, and when you're testing, you don't want to just test if the game works, right? You want to use tests as a way to answer specific questions and goals. So for example, you might test to see if you're understanding the problem correctly. And when I say the problem, that means like the market need, the audience demand, right? Do people actually want to see a game in this category? Like even not considering your game itself, but do people want to see this gap filled to begin with? Um, for the second point, you want to validate your game itself, right? So your proposed idea versus prototype, or compared to other alternatives. Now, um, this first point is much miles more important than the second point. Like you want to make sure you understand the problem correctly, more than your game itself, because nothing will waste your time more than solving the wrong problem. Even though you solve the problem correctly, you got to make sure you're solving the right problem, meeting the right need, right? So that's more important than validating your game itself. Um, and as we saw earlier, testing on real players gives you insights that you wouldn't get otherwise, right? You have to put yourself out there to test with real people, and otherwise, like you can't possibly understand what people are thinking when they play your game. Let's look at some examples. This left one is a way of embedding a Google form into your game, and this is helpful for testing your game or running playtests. This one is made by Bitwise Andrea. If you look up Bitwise Andrea Google form, then you'll likely find this module. And this right side is an example of a QA testing server. So there's quite a few servers out there that will let you run QA tests on a moment's notice. And all you have to do is to join this server or uh, like a server like this and send them your game, and you'll get a lot of feedback on your game really quickly. And here are some examples of testing your game. This one is on the left side is testing your game through Discord and screen sharing what everyone's seeing. So then you can see what players are actually doing. Um, like even though you might create your game a certain way, but people might play it differently. And on the right side, you'll see that there's so many bugs. There's people playing games in the way that you have never intended, right? You would never intend people to never even finish the tutorial. They just completely ignored the tutorial and just built their city with all these bugs and problems. So that's one thing you want to understand is not just if your game works, but are people playing it the way you intended it? And are they interested in something else, actually? Are they interested in just building the city, ignoring all of the warnings and tutorial tips, stuff like that? The last step is about iterating. So when you want to iterate, you want to refine and pivot your ideas based on what you find. You want to settle on the best ideas, like filter out what's working best and keep moving forward. And you want to keep doing this about every month. And as you're building out your projects, remember to always frequently define, track, and limit your project scope. And you should do this very frequently, especially during your game jam, because you have very limited time and resources. And this will help you reduce overscoping. And what that means is like getting the lay of the land, understanding where your project is at, and making sure you don't overstep the time and resources that you have available. And so the results of this cycle have resulted in these games, right? We saw Warrior Cats earlier. Um, that resulted in an official partnership with the Warrior Cats series, with the brand, and they made an official game um, based off of what they learned from the 2006 Warriors Cat game. I believe it was 2006. Um, and Adopt Me, the whole pets movement was born out of initially having like a adopt kids game, but they tested pets and pets took off. So now they're pets oriented. And they would have never gotten that by just staying on their original path. And Bloxburg was born out of neighborhood of Robloxia and all of those sort of games. Being able to have your own life and build your own house. That was their selling point. Starscape was born out of very basic ship flying prototypes. Skyblock, the whole building area, was born out of very basic Skyblock prototype. And now they're focused on having these huge creations. Dragon Adventures was, this is by Twin Atlas or Sonar Studios. Um, this is born out of games like Wolves Live and also Warrior Cats. They saw that these games were successful in the past. They saw an opportunity to um, take those ideas further with their own ideas. So let's do a brief recap. We have this four-step cycle of ideate, prototype, test, and iterate. And we want to do this about every month or so. And looking on the next slide, it's most importantly, have fun as you're building out your game. Even though it can be intimidating to work on these games, remember to take a step back and check in with your team and with the state of the project so that you don't overscope. And we make games because we love doing it, so remember to have fun when doing that. And thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer your questions. Otherwise, if you are interested in connecting, these are my socials on other platforms. Thank you. So let's take a look at the chat. I'm going to switch over there. Oh yeah, if you like the slide deck, this is posted in the resources channel. Good ending in cone. Wow, that must have taken you like many hours. Cool. Any questions you guys have?
This was very comprehensive. Like, this was great. Thanks.
Thank
I learned
you.
things.
Glad it was helpful.
And don't forget, you guys can also raise your hands and ask questions live on stage as well.
I'll just chill here probably until 3 p.m. and uh 3 p.m. my time, which is noon Pacific time. So any questions you guys have? I should put on some music. How
I
to
think you can
effect
with the stage.
let's see. Someone asked how to effectively communicate with teammates. First step is to establish expectations, right? So some expectations are like, um, when do you expect people to be on? When do you expect like response times, development on the game, stuff like that. And once that is down, that's going to clear up a lot of the overhead between your teammates. And above all, just communicating, making sure you're all on the same page about everything. Um, if you can do that, that should solve most of your problems, almost all of your problems, is communicating. We've got a question from Enigmatic Graphics, maybe? Let me see if I can put on some music in the meantime. Let's see here. Alrighty, here we go. Wow,
What
that
would
is
you say
really
are
loud.
some of the common rookie mistakes teams or individual developers make when developing a game?
Give me a sec. So common mistakes by individuals developing a game.
Mm.
Let's see. Common mistakes. I mean, I guess biggest one is probably going to be overscoping. A lot of projects fail because of overscoping, um, or lack of market demand. But definitely overscoping is they have this huge idea for a game, but they get burnt out from all the different features they want to add in. And definitely the biggest thing you want to focus on is keeping it simple to the specific loop you want to build. Um, and Enigmatic Graphics is asking, how do I lead a team across different time zones? And uh, like the best answer again is to set expectations, right? And the kind of expectations you want to set across time zones is like, okay, if I send a message at this time, like what are the time ranges that you expect like a response? And like who is responsible for what? Um, and I think a type of team culture that you want to establish is that like there's no wrong answers and there's no bad responses. Um, it's like an open space where anyone's able to talk about anything. Um, Dragon is asking, um, not releasing your game for testing. Yeah, so the an important takeaway from today's talk is to test often, test early and often, at various levels of quality, right? Even if it's just paper and pencil, even if it's just like basic bare bones game, right? You want to test the bare bones idea to see if it's going to work. And you should do this at least every month. Like, even if you feel like the game's not ready, like, you should be testing with your own community. A lot of teams are bogged down by the fact that, oh, the game's not ready yet, or like, oh, we need to add this first, or this needs to be part of the gameplay loop. And you really just have to test early and test often. Stick with small prototypes. And that's the best idea I can give. Any other questions or follow-ups? I hope I answered your questions.
In a game jam setting, especially because a lot of these students are going to hop over to a jam starting literally today. I hope you guys are excited. But in a game jam setting, you know, and you're working with a constraint, which is a theme, what would you say is the best advice when it comes to designing a game in that kind of space and environment?
For very limited time constraints, um, the best advice I would say is to define what exactly is the goal, and what scope of the game is going to fit that goal. And in the kind of term we use for in game dev or even product dev is called MVP, which stands for minimum viable product. And this is the minimum game that you can build that still reaches all those goals that you want to achieve during this short time span. And when you scope out exactly what your MVP is, that's going to give you a good idea of how to budget your time and resources and how to split that work across your team. And doing all of that planning is miles more important than actually sitting down and doing the work. And it's not super hard planning, right? It's just saying like, oh, these are our goals, right? We want to build a space game with these features, these core features, and this core gameplay loop. And that's exactly what we want. Let's see. Do you guys hear the music?
No.
No? Okay.
No, no.
Wait, I swear it was working earlier. It's okay. Let me.
You on Spotify?
I'm just streaming my window. I can
Oh,
fix it
you're
though.
yeah.
Let's see. Output. Let me see. Input from BH, maybe?
Sometimes Discord is finicky that way.
Oh, you hear it? It's just quiet? Okay, so it was working. Let me see.
We can also wrap
Okay,
up.
now I don't even hear anything.
Oh, can you hear me?
Hang on. Oh no, I can't hear anyone. Let's see. Okay, I think it works now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sick. So I was gonna say, I think we could just wrap up right now, and then if anyone has any questions after, they can use hashtag questions and help. Um, and yeah, I mean, this was great. Thank you so much, Hypen. And
Awesome.
if there are any other additional resources that pop into your mind in relation to like game design or anything beyond that, obviously
It's 3
feel free to use
o'clock.
the resources channel. And we will be announcing our theme at about an hour-ish live after the starting a class on Roblox workshops. So if you guys are interested in being one of the first people to hear it, it'll be during that workshop.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it. Hope you guys all have a good day.
Alrighty. See you guys later.
Bye-bye.